Zakthar stood before the massive viewing screen in the command chamber of the Velnari flagship, watching the small blue planet spin slowly in the darkness of space. His 6 arms moved across the control panels with practiced ease as he recorded his observations into the military archive. The third planet of this yellow star system appeared unremarkable by Confederation standards. Yet something about it made his mandibles click with curiosity. The War Council had designated this world as Target 77 Alpha, another primitive civilization to be absorbed into the Velnari Confederation. Zakthar had studied dozens of such worlds during his long career as a military strategist. Most species surrendered after witnessing the power of Confederation fleets. Those who resisted rarely lasted more than a few rotations before their governments collapsed under the weight of superior technology and coordinated assault. War Prime. Kethaval approached the observation deck, his massive form casting shadows across the instrument panels. The War Prime's battle scars told the story of 40 successful conquests, and his presence commanded immediate respect from every warrior aboard the ship. He gestured toward the blue world with one of his primary arms, while his other limbs adjusted various tactical displays. "What is your assessment of the local species, strategist?" Kethaval's voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. His eyes, black as void space, fixed on Zakthar with the intensity that had broken the will of countless enemy commanders. Zakthar activated his personal datapad and began reading from his preliminary report. The information scroll displayed crude images of the bipedal creatures that inhabited the planet's surface. The species calls itself humans and shows typical patterns of a developing civilization. They have achieved basic space travel within their local system, but lack faster-than-light capabilities. Their technology appears to be approximately 800 cycles behind Confederation standards. The War Prime examined the displayed data with professional interest. Images of human cities, their primitive spacecraft, and their military installations rotated slowly on the main screen. Their weapons appeared laughably simple compared to Confederation plasma cannons and molecular disruptors. Their fastest ships moved like insects compared to Velnari vessels that could fold space itself. Their military organization shows significant inefficiency, Zakthar continued, highlighting various tactical reports. They maintain separate fighting forces for different regions of their planet, often with conflicting command structures. Some areas appear to be in constant conflict with neighboring territories. This lack of unity should make conquest relatively straightforward. Kethaval nodded approvingly. The pattern matched dozens of other worlds they had conquered. Divided societies with primitive technology rarely posed serious challenges to Confederation forces. The War Prime had already begun formulating standard occupation protocols when Zakthar raised one of his secondary arms to indicate additional information. "There is one curiosity worth noting, War Prime. The humans appear to have an unusual relationship with warfare itself. Unlike most species that view conflict as a necessary evil, humans seem to have developed elaborate rituals and traditions around combat. They create detailed historical records of their battles and honor their warriors with permanent monuments." The War Prime's mandibles clicked with amusement. Many primitive species glorified violence before experiencing the reality of modern warfare. The romantic notions usually disappeared quickly when faced with weapons that could vaporize entire cities from orbit. Still, he appreciated thorough intelligence gathering from his strategists. "Begin standard first contact protocols," Kethaval commanded, moving toward his command position. "Deploy reconnaissance drones and establish communication channels. We will offer them the opportunity to surrender peacefully before demonstrating our capabilities." Zakthar activated the communication array and began transmitting the standard surrender demand that had been used successfully across the galaxy. The message, translated into the dominant human languages, offered the inhabitants of Earth a simple choice: submit to Confederation authority and accept peaceful integration, or face the consequences of resistance. The response came faster than expected. Instead of the usual confused panic or immediate capitulation, human communication networks erupted with activity. Military installations across the planet activated defensive systems, while civilian populations began organized evacuation procedures. Most surprisingly, several human leaders broadcast defiant messages rejecting the Confederation's offer without any apparent consideration of the consequences. One transmission caught Zakthar's particular attention. A human military officer named Jake Morrison spoke from what appeared to be the bridge of their largest space-based vessel. Morrison's voice carried no trace of fear or uncertainty as he addressed the alien fleet directly. "We've received your demands, and our answer is simple. Earth is not for sale, not for lease, and definitely not for conquest. If you want our world, you're welcome to try taking it." The audacity of the response surprised even the War Prime. Most species required at least a demonstration of Confederation firepower before understanding the futility of resistance. These humans appeared to be rejecting superior force without even requesting proof of the invaders' capabilities. Zakthar watched with professional interest as human forces began coordinating their defense. Despite their technological limitations, their response showed remarkable organization for a supposedly divided species. Ships from different nations joined together under unified command structures. Ground-based defenses aligned their targeting systems toward probable invasion routes. Most intriguingly, civilian populations began supporting military operations with resources and personnel normally reserved for their own regional conflicts. "Initiate Phase 1 assault protocols," Kethaval ordered, his voice carrying the weight of inevitable victory. "Target their orbital installations first, then their major population centers. Standard occupation doctrine applies." The first wave of Confederation fighters launched from the massive carrier ships, their sleek forms cutting through space toward Earth's outer defenses. Zakthar activated his recording systems, preparing to document another routine conquest for the military archives. He expected to observe the typical pattern: initial human resistance followed by growing desperation, eventual breakdown of command structures, and final surrender when the full scope of Confederation power became apparent. The first engagement occurred near Earth's largest orbital station. Human defenders launched primitive missiles and energy weapons against the advancing Confederation forces. As predicted, their technology proved inadequate against superior shielding and firepower. Several human vessels exploded under concentrated plasma fire, their debris scattering into the void. But something in the human response pattern struck Zakthar as unusual. Instead of retreating when outmatched, the surviving human ships pressed their attack with increased aggression. They seemed to adapt their tactics in real time, focusing their limited firepower on specific target points rather than spreading their attacks randomly. More disturbing, damaged human vessels continued fighting even when their destruction seemed inevitable. One particular incident captured Zakthar's attention completely. A small human fighter, its hull breached and engines failing, deliberately rammed itself into a Confederation cruiser rather than attempting escape or surrender. The explosion caused minimal damage to the larger ship, but the action itself defied standard military logic. No rational species sacrificed valuable pilots and equipment for symbolic gestures during hopeless battles. As the first day of conflict concluded, Zakthar reviewed his observations with growing puzzlement. The humans had lost every engagement and suffered casualties far exceeding Confederation losses. Their technology remained laughably inferior, and their strategic position appeared hopeless. Yet their communications networks buzzed with increased determination rather than despair. Their military leaders spoke of adaptation and learning, rather than surrender negotiations. War Prime Keithful approached the observation deck as tactical reports flowed across the command displays. "Your assessment of Day 1 operations, strategist?" Zakthar hesitated before responding, his training warring with his instincts. The data clearly indicated successful first-phase operations according to all established metrics. Enemy losses exceeded projections while Confederation casualties remained minimal. All tactical objectives had been achieved ahead of schedule, yet something felt wrong. The humans' reaction pattern differed from every other species in his experience. They seemed to view their defeats not as discouragement but as education. Their leaders spoke of learning from each engagement, adapting to Confederation tactics and preparing for continued resistance. Most disturbing of all, their civilian population appeared to be rallying around their military forces, rather than pressuring for surrender negotiations. Operations proceed according to standard protocols. "War Prime," Zakthar finally reported, though his mandibles clicked with unconscious anxiety. "However, I recommend continued observation of human behavioral patterns. This species may require modified approach strategies." Kethvol's expression showed mild interest but no concern. The second phase of the invasion began at dawn over the human city they called New York. Zakthar positioned himself at his observation station as Confederation dropships descended through the atmosphere like metallic rain. The War Prime had ordered a demonstration of overwhelming force to break human morale before the main planetary assault. Standard protocol demanded the capture of major population centers with minimal resistance through shock and terror tactics. Captain Ryan Hayes stood on a rooftop overlooking the harbor, watching alien vessels approach his city. His radio crackled with reports from defensive positions throughout the metropolitan area. Hayes had spent 20 years in human military service, fighting in conflicts across his planet, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The enemy ships moved with technological precision that made human aircraft look like primitive flying machines. Zakthar observed the human defensive preparations with analytical interest. Unlike other species that typically evacuated their civilians and withdrew military forces to secondary positions, humans appeared to be doing the opposite. Civilians moved in organized groups toward predetermined shelter areas, while military personnel took positions throughout the urban landscape. Most unusually, many civilians remained to assist military operations rather than seeking safety in distant locations. The first Confederation landing craft touched down in Central Park, disgorging squads of Velnari warriors equipped with plasma weapons and personal shield generators. The aliens advanced with confidence born from countless similar operations on other worlds. Their tactical doctrine called for rapid movement to key strategic points, followed by demands for local surrender. Hayes coordinated the human response from his command position, directing scattered military units throughout the city. His forces consisted of regular army personnel, National Guard units, local police, and hastily organized civilian volunteers. By all military standards, his situation appeared hopeless. The enemy possessed superior weapons, advanced technology, and overwhelming numerical advantage. The first engagement occurred when Confederation forces attempted to secure the city's main communication center. Lieutenant Amy Foster led a mixed unit of soldiers and armed civilians in what should have been a suicidal defense of the installation. Zakthar expected to witness the typical pattern of brief resistance, followed by rapid collapse when human weapons proved ineffective against alien armor. Instead, he observed something unprecedented. Foster's forces did not engage the Confederation troops in direct combat. They used the urban environment itself as a weapon, collapsing buildings to block alien advance routes, flooding underground tunnels to deny the enemy cover, and setting fires to create smoke screens that interfered with alien targeting systems. When direct confrontation became unavoidable, humans fought with a ferocity that shocked even experienced Velnari warriors. Zakthar watched one particular human soldier, Sergeant Pete Collins, single-handedly defend a bridge crossing for over 6 hours. Collins had been wounded early in the engagement, his left arm hanging useless at his side and blood streaming from a head wound. Any rational warrior would have retreated or surrendered when facing such overwhelming odds while injured. Collins did neither. He continued fighting with increasing effectiveness as his wounds accumulated. When his primary weapon ran out of ammunition, he switched to a backup. When that failed, he used improvised explosives. When those were exhausted, he employed hand-to-hand combat with a skill that impressed even Velnari close combat specialists. Most disturbing to Zakthar, Collins seemed to become more dangerous as he sustained more injuries, as if pain and damage somehow enhanced his combat abilities. The bridge incident ended when human reinforcements arrived to extract Collins, but not before he had eliminated 17 Confederation warriors and delayed an entire advance column for most of the day. As medical personnel carried the wounded sergeant to safety, Zakthar heard him arguing with the medics about returning to combat immediately. Similar patterns emerged throughout the city. Human forces employed tactics that seemed designed more to inflict casualties than to hold territory. They appeared willing to sacrifice strategic positions if doing so would damage the invading forces. Most puzzling, human civilians demonstrated remarkable skill at supporting military operations despite having no apparent formal training in warfare. Dr. Lisa Carter worked frantically in a research facility beneath the city, examining pieces of Confederation technology recovered from the battlefield. Her team of scientists and engineers had been studying alien equipment for only 3 days, yet they had already begun to understand basic operational principles. Carter's preliminary report suggested that human scientists were reverse engineering advanced technology at a rate that should have been impossible. Zakthar accessed, intercepted human communications, and discovered that Carter's team had successfully activated a captured Confederation plasma weapon. More disturbing, they had begun modifying the weapon to work with human power sources and targeting systems. The modifications showed creative engineering that suggested humans possessed an intuitive understanding of principles that had taken the Confederation centuries to develop. The War Prime visited Zakthar's observation station as the first day of planetary assault concluded. Confederation forces had achieved most of their territorial objectives, capturing key installations and establishing forward operating bases in major population centers. Casualty reports indicated acceptable losses within projected parameters. By all standard measurements, the operation proceeded successfully. The humans fight with more determination than anticipated, Kethval observed, studying tactical displays that showed continued resistance throughout the occupied territories. However, their casualties far exceed ours, and they lack the technology to pose serious threats to our main forces. Zakthar hesitated before responding. His training indicated that the War Prime's assessment was accurate according to established military doctrine. Confederation forces maintained overwhelming technological and numerical advantages. Human resistance, while fierce, could not alter the ultimate outcome of the conflict. Yet Zakthar's observations suggested patterns that troubled him deeply. The humans were not simply fighting desperately against superior forces. They appeared to be learning from each engagement, adapting their tactics with unprecedented speed. More importantly, their civilian population was not demanding surrender negotiations as expected. Instead, human leaders spoke of long-term resistance and warned their people to prepare for extended conflict. War Prime, I have observed some unusual characteristics in human combat behavior, Zakthar reported carefully. They appear to treat each battle as a learning experience rather than simply attempting to achieve immediate tactical objectives. Their adaptation rate exceeds any species in our historical databases. Kethval's mandibles clicked with mild interest. Elaborate on this assessment, strategist. Zakthar activated his personal recordings, displaying examples of human tactical evolution throughout the day. Observe this sequence from the morning engagement at their financial district. Initially, human forces employed conventional defensive formations that proved ineffective against our plasma weapons. However, by the afternoon assault on their government buildings, they had modified their tactics to exploit weaknesses they had discovered in our armor systems. The display showed human forces using focused energy weapons to target specific points on Confederation battlesuits, causing system failures that had not occurred during previous conquered worlds. More disturbing, the humans appeared to have developed these targeting solutions through field observation rather than detailed technical analysis. Additionally, War Prime, their reverse engineering capabilities appear exceptional. Intelligence reports indicate that human scientists have successfully operated captured Confederation technology after only minimal exposure to our systems. This suggests cognitive abilities that may have been underestimated in our initial assessments. Kethval examined the evidence with professional attention but showed no signs of concern. Primitive species often demonstrated surprising ingenuity when facing extinction. Their desperation sometimes led to creative solutions, but these temporary adaptations rarely altered the fundamental balance of power between advanced and primitive civilizations. Continue monitoring human responses, the War Prime commanded. Document any significant tactical developments for future reference. However, maintain standard operational procedures. These humans may prove more entertaining than most conquered species, but the outcome remains inevitable. As the second day of invasion began, Zakthar observed human forces implementing new tactical doctrines based on lessons learned during the previous day's battles. Captain Hayes coordinated a defense of Lower Manhattan that employed integrated civilian and military personnel in ways that confused Confederation targeting systems. Lieutenant Foster led a counterattack that successfully recaptured a communication facility using weapons and tactics that had not existed in human arsenals 24 hours earlier. Most significantly, Dr. Carter's research team achieved a breakthrough that sent chills through Zakthar's nervous system. The third week of the invasion marked a turning point that Zakthar would remember for the rest of his existence. What the War Council had expected to be a completed conquest had evolved into something unprecedented in Confederation military history. The humans had not only refused to surrender, but had begun pushing back against occupying forces with increasing effectiveness. Colonel Matt Baker crouched in the ruins of what had once been downtown Chicago, coordinating guerrilla operations that transformed occupied territories into nightmares for Velnari forces. Baker had been a military engineer before the invasion, specializing in defensive fortifications and logistics. Now he commanded a mixed force of soldiers, civilians, and volunteers who moved through the urban wasteland like ghosts, striking Confederation positions and vanishing before retaliation could be organized. Zakthar observed Baker's forces with growing unease. Traditional military doctrine held that irregular forces could harass occupying armies, but could never pose serious threats to technologically superior enemies. Guerrilla warfare was supposed to be a desperate tactic employed by defeated populations to maintain symbolic resistance before inevitable surrender. Baker's operations defied these expectations. His forces did not simply harass Confederation patrols or sabotage supply lines. They systematically dismantled alien infrastructure with surgical precision, targeting critical systems that crippled entire sectors of the occupation force. More disturbing, they appeared to understand Velnari technology better than the aliens themselves, exploiting weaknesses that had never been discovered during centuries of Confederation expansion. The turning point came during an assault on a Velnari command post in the industrial district. Zakthar expected to observe a conventional attack that would result in human casualties and minimal damage to alien positions. Instead, he witnessed something that challenged his understanding of warfare itself. Marine Sergeant Kelly Thompson led the assault team through a route that should have been impossible to navigate. She emerged from storm drains that connected to the building's foundation, dropped from air ventilation systems that accessed the command center directly, and attacked from directions that Velnari architects had never considered vulnerable. Thompson had been wounded during the approach, sustaining injuries that should have rendered her combat ineffective. 3 broken ribs restricted her movement. A shattered left arm hung useless at her side, and blood loss from multiple lacerations should have caused unconsciousness within minutes. Any rational warrior would have withdrawn from combat to seek medical attention. Instead, Thompson became more effective as her injuries accumulated. She moved with mechanical precision despite her wounds, coordinating her team's assault with tactical brilliance that impressed even experienced Velnari commanders. When direct combat became necessary, she fought with a ferocity that seemed to intensify with each new injury she sustained. Zakthar watched in horrified fascination as Thompson continued fighting with determination that bordered on impossibility. She eliminated 7 Confederation warriors in close combat, while suffering wounds that would have killed most species. When her primary weapon was destroyed by plasma fire, she improvised explosives from materials found in the command post itself. When those ran out, she used hand-to-hand combat techniques that seemed to cause psychological trauma in alien defenders. Most disturbing of all, Thompson appeared to be enjoying herself. Intercepted human communications revealed that she spoke of the battle as challenging and interesting rather than desperate or terrifying. She treated superior alien technology not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as a puzzle to be solved through creative application of violence. The command post fell within 2 hours. Its defenders either eliminated or fled in terror. Thompson's forces captured intact communication equipment, tactical computers, and weapon systems that would provide human researchers with unprecedented access to Confederation military secrets. As medical personnel treated Thompson's wounds, she was already planning the next assault on alien positions. Dr. Carter's research team had meanwhile achieved breakthroughs that sent chills through Zakthar's analysis centers. Working with captured Confederation technology and battlefield intelligence gathered by combat forces, her scientists had successfully created hybrid weapons systems that surpassed both human and alien original designs. The latest development particularly concerned Zakthar. Carter's team had not simply reverse-engineered Confederation plasma weapons or defensive systems. They had improved upon alien technology using human engineering principles that enhanced effectiveness beyond original specifications. Their modified weapons possessed greater range, improved accuracy, and increased destructive potential than standard Confederation equipment. More troubling, the humans had begun manufacturing these hybrid weapons in significant quantities. Underground facilities hidden throughout human territories produced equipment that armed resistance forces with capabilities approaching parity with Velnari military technology. What should have been a technological impossibility was becoming reality through human determination and creativity. Captain Ben Lewis demonstrated the effectiveness of human-modified technology during an engagement that shattered Zakthar's confidence in Confederation superiority. Lewis piloted a single fighter craft equipped with hybrid weapons against a Velnari battlecruiser that outmassed his ship by several thousand tons. The engagement should have lasted seconds, with the human fighter vaporized by concentrated plasma fire from the alien warship. Instead, Lewis employed tactics that seemed to anticipate Confederation defensive responses before they occurred. He attacked critical systems with surgical precision, targeting weaknesses that existed only in theoretical analyses of Velnari ship design. Within 20 minutes, Lewis had crippled the battlecruiser's main weapons, destroyed its defensive shields, and caused catastrophic failures in its propulsion systems. The alien crew evacuated their ship moments before its power core exploded in a fireball that illuminated half the orbital zone. Zakthar reviewed the engagement recordings multiple times, searching for explanations that fit within established military doctrine. Lewis had defeated a superior enemy through skill, creativity, and technology that should not have existed. More disturbing, intercepted communications revealed that Lewis considered the victory routine rather than miraculous. The pattern repeated throughout human resistance operations. Warriors like Thompson and Lewis were not exceptional individuals, but representative examples of human capabilities under pressure. Ordinary citizens transformed into effective combatants, scientists became weapons designers, and engineers developed tactical solutions that challenged Confederation supremacy. War Prime Kethval visited Zakthar's observation station as reports accumulated of similar incidents across all occupied territories. Confederation forces found themselves fighting not a desperate resistance movement, but an evolving military force that improved its capabilities with each engagement. Explain these developments, strategist, Kethval demanded, his voice carrying undertones of concern that had not been present during earlier phases of the invasion. Our casualty reports indicate increasing losses, while human capabilities appear to be expanding beyond projected parameters. Zakthar activated his analysis displays, showing tactical evolution charts that documented human military development over the past 3 weeks. The data painted a picture that defied conventional military wisdom. Human forces had progressed from primitive resistance to near parity with Confederation technology, in a time frame that should have required decades of development. War Prime. The humans appear to possess cognitive abilities that enable unprecedented adaptation rates, Zakthar reported, his mandibles clicking with unconscious anxiety. They do not simply learn from experience. They seem to synthesize new capabilities through exposure to combat situations. The displays showed examples of human tactical evolution that occurred within individual battles rather than over extended campaigns. Warriors who began engagements with conventional weapons ended them using improvised devices that exceeded original specifications. Scientists who started with captured alien technology concluded their research with hybrid systems that surpassed Confederation designs. Additionally, War Prime. Human psychological responses to combat stress differ significantly from all species in our databases. Instead of breaking down under pressure, they appear to transcend their normal limitations. Warriors like Sergeant Thompson and Captain Lewis demonstrate capabilities that exceed baseline human parameters when engaged in combat operations. Kethval examined the evidence with growing unease. 40 successful conquests had never produced patterns like these. Primitive species typically showed brief spurts of creativity before superior technology overwhelmed their resistance. They did not evolve their capabilities faster than advanced civilizations could adapt to their innovations. What is your assessment of current operational status? The War Prime asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Zakthar hesitated before responding. Military protocols demanded optimistic assessments that emphasized Confederation advantages and minimized enemy capabilities. The fifth week of what should have been a completed conquest brought Zakthar face to face with a terrifying reality. The Velnari Confederation, victorious in 40 previous campaigns across the galaxy, was losing a war against a species they had initially classified as primitive. The humans had not simply adapted to Confederation tactics and technology. They had transcended their original limitations and become something unprecedented in galactic military. History Admiral Susan Wright coordinated the human counteroffensive from a command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. 6 weeks earlier, Wright had commanded a small defensive fleet tasked with protecting Earth's orbital installations. Now she directed operations that stretched across multiple star systems, commanding forces that included captured Confederation vessels operated by human crews who had learned alien technology faster than its original designers. Zakthar observed Wright's tactical planning sessions with growing horror. The human admiral did not simply react to Confederation moves or attempt to counter alien strategies. She anticipated Velnari decisions before they were made, implementing countermeasures for attacks that had not yet been planned. More disturbing, her strategic thinking appeared to operate on levels that exceeded normal cognitive capabilities. The breakthrough moment came during the Battle of Luna, when Wright's forces shattered the Confederation blockade around Earth's moon. Zakthar expected to witness a desperate human assault that would achieve minor tactical gains at the cost of devastating casualties. Instead, he observed a masterpiece of military planning that dismantled superior alien forces through creativity and ruthlessness that defied conventional understanding. Wright's attack began with what appeared to be a conventional frontal assault by human vessels, modified with captured Confederation technology. Velnari commanders responded with standard defensive formations that had proven effective against countless enemy species throughout galactic history. The aliens expected to repel the human attack through superior firepower and tactical coordination. Instead, the frontal assault served as a diversion for the real attack. Human forces emerged from asteroid fields, hidden bases on planetary surfaces, and even from within captured Confederation vessels that had been secretly modified by human engineers. They struck at precise moments and locations that created cascading failures throughout the alien defensive network. Most impressively, Wright's forces employed psychological warfare tactics that seemed specifically designed to exploit Velnari mental vulnerabilities that the aliens themselves had never recognized. Human ships broadcast frequencies that caused disorientation in alien crews, while modified weapon systems created visual effects that triggered deep-seated fears in Confederation warriors. Ground Commander Carl Johnson led simultaneous planetary assaults that completed the destruction of Velnari confidence. Johnson had been a logistics officer before the invasion, responsible for supply chain management and resource allocation. The war had transformed him into something that Zakthar could only describe as a perfect predator. Johnson's ground forces moved through occupied territories like a plague designed specifically to destroy Confederation morale. They did not simply attack alien positions or eliminate enemy personnel. They systematically dismantled the psychological foundation of Velnari military doctrine through operations that seemed to anticipate alien responses with supernatural accuracy. The horror reached its peak during an engagement in the Australian outback, where Corporal Eric Stone led a small human unit against a heavily fortified Confederation base. Stone had been fighting continuously for 72 hours without rest, sustained only by stimulants and determination that bordered on insanity. He suffered from severe blood loss due to multiple wounds, dehydration that should have caused organ failure, and exhaustion that would have killed most species. Rather than retreating to recover, Stone orchestrated an assault that transformed a simple base capture into a masterpiece of tactical destruction. He anticipated every Confederation defensive response, exploited weaknesses in alien positions that existed only in theoretical analyses, and coordinated his team's movements with precision that suggested telepathic communication. Zakthar watched in fascinated terror as Stone continued fighting, despite injuries that accumulated with each passing hour. The human corporal seemed to draw strength from his wounds, becoming more effective as his physical condition deteriorated. When conventional weapons failed, he improvised explosives from materials found on the battlefield. When those were exhausted, he employed hand-to-hand combat that caused psychological trauma in alien defenders. Most disturbing, Stone appeared to be improving his tactical abilities in real time during the engagement. Strategies that failed during early phases of the assault were instantly modified and refined into approaches that succeeded beyond original objectives. He seemed to learn from each mistake within seconds, adapting his techniques faster than Confederation forces could respond to his innovations. The base fell within 6 hours. Its defenders either eliminated or fled in terror from an enemy who seemed to transcend normal biological limitations. Stone's forces captured intact research facilities, communications equipment, and weapon systems that provided human scientists with complete access to Confederation military technology. Dr. Carter's research teams had meanwhile achieved their most significant breakthrough yet. Working with captured alien technology and battlefield intelligence gathered from countless engagements, her scientists had created weapon systems that specifically targeted Velnari biology and psychology. The new weapons did not simply destroy alien personnel or equipment. They were designed by beings who had studied their enemies with such thoroughness that they understood Velnari fears, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities better than the aliens understood themselves. The devices created effects that caused maximum psychological trauma to Confederation forces while leaving human personnel unaffected. Zakthar observed field tests of these weapons with mounting dread. Human forces employed devices that seemed designed by someone who had intimate knowledge of Velnari nightmares. The weapons created sounds that triggered ancestral terror responses in alien nervous systems, generated visual effects that caused hallucinations of creatures from Confederation mythology, and produced environmental conditions that reminded Velnari warriors of their species' worst historical disasters. More horrifying, the humans had developed these psychological weapons through clinical observation of their enemies during combat situations. They had studied Confederation reactions to various stimuli, analyzed alien behavioral patterns under stress, and synthesized their findings into tools of war that exceeded conventional destructive capability. Captain Ben Lewis demonstrated the effectiveness of human psychological warfare during a space engagement that shattered the last remnants of Confederation naval confidence. Lewis commanded a single modified fighter equipped with the latest human weapon systems against a Velnari fleet that outnumbered his ship by hundreds to one. The engagement lasted less than an hour, but its effects rippled through Confederation forces across multiple star systems. Lewis did not simply destroy enemy vessels or eliminate alien personnel. He created a spectacle of destruction that was specifically designed to traumatize Velnari survivors and spread terror throughout their military hierarchy. Lewis's modified weapons systems created explosions that formed patterns, reminiscent of Confederation religious symbols, twisted into blasphemous configurations. His ship's movement through space traced geometric forms that triggered deep-seated psychological responses in alien observers. Even his communication transmissions carried subliminal frequencies that caused disorientation and fear in Velnari neural structures. By the end of the engagement, surviving Confederation forces were fleeing not from superior firepower, but from an enemy who seemed to understand their deepest fears and weaknesses. Lewis had achieved victory not through conventional military means, but through warfare that operated on psychological and emotional levels that most species could not even comprehend. War Prime Kethval summoned Zakthar for an emergency consultation as reports arrived of similar incidents throughout Confederation space. Velnari forces were not simply losing battles against human opponents. They were being systematically destroyed by an enemy who had learned to weaponize fear, despair, and psychological trauma with surgical precision. Strategist, explain how primitive humans have developed capabilities that exceed our most advanced psychological warfare techniques, Kethval demanded, though his voice carried undertones of fear that had never been present during his 40 previous conquests. Zakthar activated his analysis displays, showing psychological profile charts that documented human development over the past 6 weeks. The data revealed patterns that challenged fundamental assumptions about cognitive development and military capability evolution. War Prime. The humans have not simply learned to fight effectively against our forces, Zakthar reported, his mandibles clicking with unconscious terror. They have learned to understand us better than we understand ourselves. They have studied our reactions, analyzed our fears, and weaponized our own psychology against us. The war ended not with fanfare or celebration, but with a methodical dismantling of Velnari forces that left Zakthar questioning everything he had believed about warfare, civilization, and the nature of sentient species. The humans had achieved complete victory in 8 weeks, transforming from a primitive target into the most terrifying military force the galaxy had ever witnessed. General Helen Brooks stood in the command center of what had once been the Confederation flagship, now serving as the headquarters for human military operations throughout the local stellar region. Brooks had begun the war as a logistics coordinator, responsible for supply distribution and resource management. The conflict had transformed her into something that Zakthar could only describe as the perfect military mind. Brooks did not simply defeat the Confederation forces. She systematically destroyed their will to fight through operations that demonstrated human understanding of alien psychology at levels that bordered on telepathy. Her final campaign against the remaining Velnari strongholds resembled less a military operation than a clinical dissection performed by someone who understood her subjects better than they understood themselves. The decisive battle occurred in the Proxima system, where the last major Confederation fleet had gathered for what War Prime Kethval hoped would be a final stand against human expansion. The alien force consisted of over 300 vessels, including massive dreadnoughts that had never been defeated in 40 previous conquests. Against them, Brooks deployed a human fleet of fewer than 50 ships, most of which were modified civilian vessels crewed by personnel who had learned space combat during the previous 2 months. Zakthar observed the engagement from his position aboard the Confederation command vessel, documenting what he expected to be the first human defeat since the war began. The mathematical odds strongly favored Velnari forces, and their technological advantages remained significant despite human innovations. Instead, he witnessed the complete destruction of everything the Confederation represented as a military power. Brooks's fleet did not engage in conventional space combat or attempt to match alien firepower with superior numbers. Her forces implemented strategies that seemed designed specifically to break Velnari morale and psychological coherence. Lieutenant Commander Rob Pierce led the assault that shattered the last Confederation defensive line. Pierce commanded a single modified cruiser against a formation of alien dreadnoughts that outmassed his vessel by thousands of tons. The engagement should have lasted minutes, with Pierce's ship vaporized by concentrated plasma fire from superior alien weapons. Instead, Pierce employed tactics that transformed the battle into a demonstration of human superiority that terrorized Confederation survivors. His ship moved through space in patterns that seemed impossible given known physics, while his weapon systems created effects that appeared designed to cause maximum psychological trauma in alien observers. Pierce did not simply destroy enemy vessels. He eliminated them in ways that conveyed specific messages to surviving Confederation forces. Alien dreadnoughts exploded in sequences that formed recognizable patterns, their debris fields arranged into configurations that resembled Velnari religious symbols twisted into blasphemous shapes. His ship's movement through the battlefield traced geometric forms that triggered deep-seated fears in alien neural structures. Most terrifying, Pierce's attack seemed choreographed to create maximum emotional impact on Confederation survivors. He spared specific vessels while destroying others, leaving witnesses who would carry tales of human capabilities throughout what remained of alien civilization. The survivors would spread fear more effectively than any direct military assault. Zakthar watched in horror as the Confederation fleet disintegrated, under pressure from an enemy who had learned to weaponize despair itself. Velnari commanders began surrendering not because their ships were damaged, but because their crews could no longer function under psychological assault from opponents who understood their deepest fears. The breaking point came when Pierce's forces captured the Confederation flagship without destroying it. Human boarding parties led by Marines who moved through alien corridors like predators in their natural habitat systematically eliminated resistance while leaving command personnel alive to witness their own defeat. Zakthar found himself face to face with human warriors who studied him with professional interest rather than hatred or anger. They seemed curious about his species' psychology, analyzing his reactions with scientific detachment that was somehow more terrifying than any expression of rage would have been. "We've been studying your tactical responses," one human soldier Sergeant Maria Santos explained as she secured the command center. Her voice carried no emotion, only clinical interest in the subject of her research. Your species shows predictable patterns under stress that make you relatively easy to defeat once we understand your psychological architecture. The casual competence in her voice chilled Zakthar more than any threat could have. Santos spoke of conquering the Confederation not as a desperate struggle or momentous achievement, but as an interesting problem that had been solved through systematic analysis and creative application of violence. War Prime Kethval surrendered his forces formally to General Brooks in a ceremony that demonstrated human understanding of Velnari culture at levels that seemed impossible without decades of anthropological study. Brooks had learned enough about Confederation traditions to structure the surrender ritual in ways that maximized psychological impact on alien survivors while establishing human dominance according to Velnari cultural protocols. Your species shows remarkable potential, Brooks told Kethval during the surrender ceremony, her tone suggesting professional respect rather than contempt or victory. We've learned more about warfare from fighting you than from centuries of conflicts among ourselves. You've helped us discover capabilities we didn't know we possessed. The casual acknowledgement that humans had used the entire war as a learning experience horrified Zakthar more than any threat or boast could have. Brooks spoke of the Confederation's destruction not as revenge for invasion but as educational opportunity that had allowed humanity to test their ultimate potential against worthy opponents. Dr. Carter's final research reports revealed the true scope of human achievement during the conflict. Her teams had not simply reverse-engineered Confederation technology or developed effective countermeasures against alien weapons. They had created entirely new fields of scientific inquiry based on principles discovered through warfare. Human scientists had learned to manipulate matter at quantum levels, redesign biological systems through controlled evolution, and create weapons that operated on psychological and spiritual planes that most species could not even perceive. They had achieved scientific breakthroughs that should have required centuries of peaceful research through 8 weeks of total war. Most disturbing, Carter's teams spoke of their discoveries with enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. They had found their species' ultimate calling through conflict, and they approached their work with dedication that transformed scientific inquiry into something approaching religious devotion. Captain Jake Morrison's final log entry, recorded as human forces established control over former Confederation territories, revealed the psychological transformation that warfare had produced in his species. Morrison spoke not of relief at surviving alien invasion, but of satisfaction at having discovered humanity's true potential. The war taught us something important about ourselves, Morrison recorded, his voice carrying implications that chilled Zakthar to his core. We're not just good at fighting. We're naturally gifted at it in ways that other species cannot match or understand. The Confederation gave us the opportunity to discover what we're really capable of when properly challenged. Morrison's tone suggested anticipation rather than exhaustion as he contemplated humanity's future among the stars. He spoke of seeking worthy opponents and expressed hope that the galaxy might provide challenges that would allow his species to continue growing and evolving through conflict. Zakthar completed his final report as human forces began expanding throughout former Confederation space, establishing colonies and military installations with efficiency that suggested they had been planning galactic conquest for decades rather than months. His observations painted a picture that would haunt him for the rest of his existence. The humans had not simply won a war against superior alien forces. They had discovered their species' true nature through conflict and transformed themselves into something that transcended normal biological and psychological limitations. They had become perfect predators, and the galaxy was now their hunting ground. Most terrifying, they appeared to have enjoyed the experience. Human communications revealed that their population viewed the war not as a traumatic struggle, but as the most fulfilling period in their species' history. They had found their calling through violence, and they approached their future with anticipation that suggested they were eager for greater challenges. Zakthar's final warning to whatever remained of galactic civilization carried a simple message that would echo through space long after his own species had been forgotten.